This is CBC Vancouver News.
The threat of flooding looms over much of this province as mudslides close roads and homes are evacuated. Plus, demanding better protections at work.
It's a system which discourages you to be safe, basically.
Drivers who work for Uber and Lyft threaten to strike over their work conditions. And 1 month after the city cleared tents on East Hastings, City Hall reflects on the move.
I feel a tremendous amount of remorse for making that comment and having it not be true.
As residents still struggle to find a place to live. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Michelle Ghoussoub. Communities in BC's southern interior are bracing for more potential flooding as Environment Canada warns of severe thunderstorms and heavy rain into tomorrow. That warning is in effect for much of the Okanagan and Kootenay Lake. The River Forecast Centre has issued a flood warning for the Lower Thompson, Whiteman River and Boundary, with more areas in the interior under flood watch. The Ministry of Emergency Management is warning people living in these areas to be prepared to leave, something that has already been ordered in the village of Cache Creek, parts of the Okanagan Indian Band, and the regional district of Kootenay Boundary. Meanwhile, the entire village of Salmo is now under evacuation alert. This comes after days of warm weather caused the snowpack to melt, and officials warn this may become a pattern.
The weekend looks pretty unsettled throughout the province. We're going to see some scattered showers even on Sunday. Now, what's going to be interesting is that things will progressively get drier and warmer through the week next week. And by next weekend, we could be in for another round of heat.
Environment Canada is warning people to check travel and weather advisories frequently and watch for mud and landslides when driving. One mudslide on Wednesday morning near Carameos has created a major roadblock as Brady Strachan reports the destruction has cut people off from their homes and their families.
Band officials are keeping people and traffic back from the mudslide area that's on the other side of a roadblock. Now, the slide is covering the roadway and cutting off access to 8 homes on the other side. The slide happened on Wednesday morning when a massive amount of mud, water, and debris came rushing down a steep gully and onto the roadway. Band officials say the slide covers the road about 100 meters across and is several meters thick in the middle. The slide has cut off Kalika Archukin from her family. She was at work when the mud came down, and now she can't return home. She says it's an unnerving situation.
It sucks because I can't see my nephews or my brother or any of my family that's stuck on the other side. I'm just super glad that everyone's safe and no one got hurt.
On Thursday, the band used a helicopter to bring 4 elders and Archukin's daughter to safety and to deliver food and supplies to people still on the other side. Chief Keith Crow says they can't begin to clear the mud away because water is still flowing down the gully. He says they're at the mercy of the weather.
Rain. Really hoping that we don't get the predicted thunder showers. Mild rain like it's raining right now. If it stays not too bad, we'll be okay, but we don't want those sudden bursts and downpours that could really affect the creeks.
The band is also dealing with another creek that has spilled its banks and is threatening homes. And with more rain in the forecast, it could be until mid next week before crews can finally start to remove the mud across the roadway here so that people like Archukin and her daughter can finally get home. Brady Strachan, CBC News on the Lower Similkameen Indian Band near Osoyoos.
And to another emergency in this province, an evacuation order has been issued for properties in the village of McBride, which is being threatened by the Tear Creek wildfire. Some properties in the Boundary Goodloe area are also under evacuation order due to the Boundary Lake wildfire. Anyone in the evacuation order area is being asked to leave immediately. Well, back here in the Lower Mainland, a group of gig workers is reigniting calls for better safety protocols after an attack on an Uber driver in Abbotsford. As Janella Hamilton reports, the workers say they're prepared to strike.
I have to do everything by myself. As the sole caregiver for his aging father, Kaljit Singh needs a job with flexible hours. In 2020, he began working as an Uber driver, but he says inflation and the rising cost of living are eating into his earnings.
If you deduct all the depreciations, all the gas expenses, all the repairs, my income was like only $33,000.
Singh says as an independent contractor, he has no minimum wage, job security, overtime, nor vacation pay, protections most workers have under the Employment Standards Act.
If I deduct gas, taxes, everything, he was on $3 to $4 per hour. That's what we are getting.
He says most ride-hail and food delivery companies take about half of every fare.
Uber drivers, Lyft driver, they're humans. We are not machines.
That's not an acceptable standard of work for anybody in this province, and it shouldn't be for these folks, mostly, newer people to our country.
Indiraj Gill says many workers feel they have no voice, and when they do report concerns, numerous drivers say the companies usually penalize them by freezing their accounts.
That is a punch to the gut for somebody who's maybe reliant on the work.
Uber says when a driver or passenger reports a problem, it tries to conduct what it calls a thorough investigation. That may include temporarily placing a driver's account on hold. So many stay quiet.
It's a system which discourages you to be safe, basically.
These drivers are calling on the BC government to change legislation that automatically covers them under workers' compensation, allows them to unionize, and have pay transparency. Skidmore says more women drivers are now delivering food instead of picking up passengers because they feel unsafe.
One of my colleagues was having a chat with a worker the other day, and she was driving her Uber with her grandma to add an extra layer of safety. That shouldn't need to happen.
Singh says if the government does not step up soon, he and other drivers are prepared to strike. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Surrey.
Today marks the National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. Many people are remembering those that they've lost. The event is marked every year by the hanging of red dresses for a lost or stolen Indigenous sister. Today, people gathered at Vancouver City Hall where parents of missing women shared their grief.
So all of you are witnesses today to hear the stories, feel the anguish, have sympathy and understanding, compassion, as well as raise awareness of Red Dress Days.
Red Dress Day started in 2010, but the issues the day commemorates have existed for much longer. As Wamish Hamilton reports, remembering is just the first step.
The roots of Red Dress Day go back much further than 2010. The year a Métis artist hung hundreds of red dresses around Winnipeg. Compared to then, or even earlier, the names of missing and murdered women and girls are more prominent today. Noelle Osoup, Tatiana Harrison, Chelsea Poorman. We say their names, we remember them. Sensibilities, if we can call them that, have changed. Because I recall a time when names weren't said aloud. There was a time nobody cared. At least that's how it felt to me. Victims of crime, these women and girls, were also victims of indifference. I remember one such death. I was 11 going on 12. A woman from my community was killed in Vancouver. Her name was Helena George. She was a mother of 6 from the Hoopachisit First Nation. It was 1976. The police and media identified her using a picture from the morgue. Her face, seen like that on TV. As I recall, that's how her family learned she had died. Indigenous women face life-threatening gender-based violence at such a disproportionate scale, it's hard to fathom. Nearly 1,500 families testified to this during a national inquiry. Their voices got through. What they had to say about their loved ones changed Canada at least a little. So back to those sensibilities, the ones I see changing. It could be argued that things are not that different, but the fact is they are. What I see is something I call reflective guilt. It calls on you to do something. It calls on you to feel. It leaves no room for banal disinterest. A bruised photo on the news. Red Dress Day is an important day for all of us to remember, reflect, and care. Every day before and after is the time to look at why we need this day at all. For CBC Vancouver, I'm Wamish Hamilton.
Nearly a month since the city of Vancouver removed tents from the downtown east side, many say the decampment may have done more harm than good. That story is next. Thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream. The World Health Organization announced today that COVID-19 no longer qualifies as a global emergency, marking the symbolic end to the devastating coronavirus pandemic that triggered once unthinkable lockdowns. We look back to those early days of the pandemic and how our lives were upended.
Hospitals in China are overwhelmed. New confirmed cases are adding up by the hour. Despite strict containment, the coronavirus has jumped to at least 18 countries, creating the potential for foreign outbreaks.
For all of these reasons, I'm declaring a public health emergency of international concern.
This extraordinary step was taken to better coordinate resources, research, and measures to stop the spread of the virus.
We don't know what sort of damage this virus could do if it were to spread in a country with a weaker health system.
Health officials are already seeing a troubling development in cases outside China. At least 4 cases of person-to-person transmission in Vietnam, Japan, Germany, and now the U.S.
This second case did not travel to China, making this the first person-to-person transmission of the novel coronavirus in the United States.
Countries are being extra cautious, advising against travel to China, even quarantining an entire cruise ship against the advice of the WHO, which seems determined to praise and protect China.
This is the time for facts, not fear. This is the time for science, not rumors.
This infectious disease doctor says the WHO had little choice but to call the emergency despite China's best efforts.
We always recognize outbreaks in hindsight. And so now they're playing catch up and they're being very aggressive trying to control this. So you can actually congratulate China for being really aggressive, but at the same time say it seems to be getting away.
China is putting a brave face on its containment efforts, celebrating the discharge of recovered patients as the number of hospital admissions grows. Vic Adopia, CBC News, Toronto.
Welcome back. It's been 1 month since the city of Vancouver removed tents on East Hastings. Yesterday, we introduced you to some of the people who were forced to leave their makeshift homes. But tonight, Leanne Young takes us to City Hall to find out what led to those actions.
We got this interesting tip, shout out to Justin McElroy, our colleague, that there was this meeting that was held October of last year and just before council was sworn in. And in this meeting, the ABC party vowed they would not displace downtown Eastside residents without adequate housing. And this was not said by the mayor. He wasn't in the room at the time, but by his former chief of staff. And we are going to go talk to him. Kareem, first of all, I wanted to ask you about that meeting. What was the promise or the vow that was made about the downtown Eastside encampments in that meeting?
I committed that we would not decamp Hastings without the appropriate housing being committed. We knew at that point that 100 to 120 modular units on Hastings and in the Athletes Village were coming online, so we were quite comfortable making that commitment at that point.
So why are you choosing to speak out now? Because you left the mayor's office about 2 months prior to all of this, right?
Yeah, I made the comments, and I think I owe the community an apology, and I'm also here just to also ask for forgiveness for misleading everyone in that way. So I feel a tremendous amount of remorse for making that comment and having it not be true, and that's why I'm here today. Just to apologize.
This is really eating at you, hey?
Yeah, no, I'm quite disheartened, and I think a lot of people in the community spent a lot of time educating me and teaching me about what was going on, what was happening, and I felt a sense of obligation that that on the day of the decampment, that the words that I said to them turned out to not be true, and yeah, it was pretty gutting. It was pretty gutting for me. You don't often go into a room like that, make the kind of commitments that you have, and then have them, turn out to not be true.
We are just waiting for the mayor, and is that him? No, that's not him. Waiting for the mayor to have a chat. Oh, there he is. So we've spoken to a number of stakeholders in the downtown east side, and there was a meeting just before you were sworn in with a group called the CCRN, so around 30 to 40 stakeholders. You weren't there that night, but your then Chief of Staff, Kareem Alam, was there, and he vowed on behalf of ABC that you would not be removing those tents until there was sufficient housing for everyone. What changed?
Well, first of all, there was sufficient housing for everyone. So, like I said, leading up to the event, everyone was offered housing, and I forget that actually.
Really, because the shelter said that they were full. All the shelters said that they were very full. UGM says they've been full for 15 months leading up to it.
So there was enough shelter space in the system. Sometimes it wasn't right there, but every single person who put their hand up was offered and received shelters.
A lot of people have come out strongly against it. So we heard from the BC Federation of Labor. They represent 500,000 members. They called it the actions callous and dehumanizing, including among them CUPE. We had 700 academics from across the country, most of them from BC, all decrying that, saying that, this is against public health best practices. Federal Housing Advocate called for a moratorium on the actions. We saw the BC Human Rights Commissioner also flag it being a problem. Then multiple frontline stakeholders on the downtown east side, nonprofits, some of them Aboriginal organization, the Battered Women's Society, all saying that this should not have happened the way it did. Why did you feel like it had to?
Well, we've spoken to multiple individuals, people, residents of Vancouver, people that are living in the downtown east side, our engineering crews, the Vancouver Fire and Rescue, the police department, and just regular citizens. And the overwhelming response has been incredibly positive. And so I think individuals that are commenting should spend a lot of time in the downtown east side.
But these are people in the downside. They're social workers.
Sure.
They're people frontline workers.
And a lot of the frontline workers that we speak to actually do support it as well. And so the reality is, look, we were enforcing a fire bylaw. My question to everyone who has these comments, so look, we welcome them. Here's the reality. What would they do in the situation that we had? We had a significant public safety risk. What happens if one of those 100-pound tanks go off and it takes out an entire structure or an entire city block where hundreds of people die? what would they say then? Like, we're not working in a perfect theoretical situation. We did have housing options available. We do have, we're providing as much support services as possible. But we have to look at it holistically and do what's good for the whole. And that's what we did that day.
So, Michelle, the first day of the formal tent removal, April 5th, your office is right down here.
Yep.
What went through your head as you watched the community youth service face that?
It was really scary, sad, and not the way things should be done. I would say the messaging had been from council, we want to do things that are community-based, community-led solutions. The community has the expertise, the knowledge, etc., so let's work together. And then when the encampment happened, de-encampment happened without the forewarning, without the collaboration, so nobody could prepare for it properly and do things. It was opposite of what they had led us to believe, the way they were going to work, and that was disappointing from a relationship perspective and traumatizing from an actual decampment perspective.
The mayor says they had to do this for safety reasons. Talking about the propane tanks that were down here, the crime. What's your response when you hear that?
I think that safety is an issue, especially gender-based violence, but forcibly removing people without giving them the supports and a place to go, it is only, it's not even a Band-Aid. It's just kind of dispersing things. It's not actually solving what the real issues are. So it's not going to change that crime, safety, gender-based violence. It's still happening. It's just not happening in one place.
The mayor says it's ultimately a public safety issue. That's why the city made the decision that it did. And, we're not privy to the up-to-date minute-by-minute information that he was. But what the mayor did say is that he's committed to cleanup for as long as it takes. And, from the many conversations we've had with people down here, some whom you heard from and some who did not want to appear on screen, almost everyone told us that they thought that it caused more harm than good, at least for them. The issue is a layered and complex one, and we'll see what the long-term effects are. But what we do know is that this community is a resilient one, and ultimately people are going to do what they need to do to survive.
And you're looking at a live shot of Georgia Street on a Friday night. Johanna will have your full forecast next.
More scrubbing, disinfecting, and wiping down high-touch areas.
These pit crews will comprise up to 4 cleaners, and they will swarm trains and vehicles using a hospital-grade disinfectant.
All part of TransLink's promise to fight the spread of COVID-19 on public transit as the province reopens and more people head back to work.
As long as you feel safe, right?
It was Cassandra Wong's first time back on the SkyTrain in 3 months.
It was pretty spaced out. I mean, again, first experience, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how everyone's going to do it on rush hour.
Rush hour will be the big challenge. Physical distancing on a crowded train, not exactly easy. But TransLink says it will try to control the number of people rushing to the platforms by slowing down access through fare gates.
Typically, only one fare gate will be set to entrance only. The other fare gates will be exit only. So that will limit the amount of people who will be able to tap through.
And to create more space, TransLink is gradually restoring services on SkyTrains, buses, and the C-Bus. And come June 1st, you'll have to start paying to ride the bus again.
It's like a shower curtain.
By that point, all buses should be fitted with plexiglass barriers. Some already have it.
I'm sure it will help.
Passengers are also asked to do their part to not get on transit if they're sick and to travel during non-peak hours. And they're also asked to wear a mask when getting on the bus or SkyTrain.
I think what we need to realize is that not everybody can safely wear a mask. So we need to be respectful of that as well. But it is a way for us to keep our droplets in, to be respectful of others. And transit is a place where you cannot always maintain that distance.
Some passengers are already masking up, but the real test will come when buses and trains are full and the crowds unavoidable. Tina Lovegreen, CBC News, Vancouver.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell. Here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
The DOXA Documentary Film Festival returns May 4th to 14th. Enjoy thoughtful and engaging documentaries, special presentations, industry events, and more. Get your tickets at doxafestival.ca. And never miss a special programming series, event, or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver inbox and keep connected with us.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace, installing the most reliable heating and cooling brand. It's hard to stop a train.
And time for our full weather forecast with meteorologist Johanna Wagstaff. Lots going on across the province, from floods to fire. Joe, what are you watching for?
Unfortunately, conditions are drying out again in the north. We're looking at a relatively cooler period over the next couple of days, but smoky sky bulletins already in place because of those existing wildfires. Let me take you back to the watches and warnings. Everyone under the white in the northeast through the Peace, that is where we are dealing with smoky skies because of existing fire conditions. That's also drifting, as you can see, in through northern Alberta. So a lot going on. We're dealing with those isolated thunderstorms tonight, escalating the flood risk. But at the same time, look at that pocket of heat as we head into the forecast, 28 up towards Fort Smith. And we're seeing those kinds of high 20 temperatures in through the Peace for the next couple of days. You really don't get the cool down that everyone else gets. You can see down towards Prince George and 18, still looking at that risk for thunderstorms tomorrow. But then we head into a warming trend. It's not much of a reprieve for the province over the weekend. And of course, it's a double-edged sword because temperatures and freezing levels come down, but then come right back up again as we head into early next week. This is YVR's forecast, but very similar trend for the whole province. Once again, we climb next week, and freezing levels by Monday, Tuesday will be back up around 3,000 meters. So we will be watching for escalated flooding once again in the interior. And these are also the same conditions that will escalate fire behavior. So very much, unfortunately, a worst case scenario as far as weather goes, a very wet weekend, not much of a break from the melt snow, and then we get into that hot, dry forecast for early next week. Likely in the interior, these temperatures will translate to mid to high 20s. And this high pressure ridge that moves in next week, very similar to what we're just coming out of. And of course, the week ended off with widespread high stream advisories, flood watches, and flood warnings in place. So really crucial to see how much rain we get this weekend across the province. I know we had thunderstorms last night in YVR, and then get ready for another round of hot and dry through next week.
Thanks, Joe. And that's our show for Friday. Thanks so much for spending tonight with us. For news anytime, visit cbc.ca/BC. Your next local newscast is on Radio 1 tomorrow morning at 6:30. Good night.